Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
Now entering the Squared Circle Pit, he is a writer, he is a rock fan and a wrestling fan, and you may have seen his coverage of AEW artists, or artists involved with AEW, I should say, on Pitchfork recently. This is Evan Minsker. Welcome to the pit, entering the pit.
Wow. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Now, Evan, Pitchfork has been in the news lately, not so much for its wrestling coverage, but for the change in the brand. What's best for the brand is Anna Wintour. So coldly put.
I've been thinking a lot about wrestling in the recent days with Pitchfork's news. Pitchfork recently underwent a big restructuring is what they call it. But that means they laid off half the staff, and I'm one of them, which is too bad, but it's very recent. It just means that Pitchfork is going to undergo some question mark changes in the future, and I won't be part of it. I'm just going to write elsewhere. It'll be fun. I have no idea what that looks like though, but it'll be fun.
You mentioned that it's true. There was a lot of kayfabe in that statement of like shutting down Pitchfork. After a careful evaluation of Pitchfork's performance, we've decided this is the best path forward for the brand so that our coverage could be. It's like, okay, so it doesn't make money, is what you're saying.
Well, they're saying it's what's best for business. It's saying they're saying that they've decided to amicably, whatever. But I got my future endeavors. That's what we'll put it.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about I have no idea what I'll do in the future, but I always think about like how when wrestlers are in WWE and then they go to AEW, there were like 6 guys in a row who did videos, like self-made videos of them like in jail and they're getting let out of jail. It's like, how about how funny it would be for like me and all my coworkers to do one of those, just to be like, all right, we've been in jail and now we're it's like some super like heavy-handed like that was the old job or whatever.
Suddenly you're just gonna show up on Slate or Salon with like a new outfit on.
It's like, wait, that's Evan Minsker's music, and then boom, do a wonderful track review.
My favorite term that she used, which is almost like, it kind of reminds me of like when Linda McMahon said the brand extension as opposed to a roster split, is she said that you're evolving the Pitchfork team to bring them under GQ.
Yes, they were evolving the team by chopping it and like throwing a bunch of us in the trash. That's an evolution. Sure. I evolve my house every time I decide that I need to sell something on Facebook Marketplace. So that's, that's
exactly. That's how I'm going to use that term from now on.
You can call it whatever you want. I just know that it's, it's heartbreaking. It was, I don't know how much your listeners ever read Pitchfork. But I'll just say like, the people who got let go, it was a cavalcade of legends, heroes of mine, honestly, in terms of like people who I was fortunate enough to work alongside, but incredible investigative reporters, incredible critics, both the editor-in-chief and the executive editor of Pitchfork, Amy Phillips and Pooja Patel, just amazing writers, thinkers about music, who just got heartlessly shown the door. And it's too bad. One of my coworkers just was on paternity leave while he got fired. So it's terrible. It's awful. It's like, you hear about this stuff in wrestling where like, I think like when Mercedes Martinez was cut from WWE, she was out injured. And it's like, that's a person who is going through something like, and they just got a terrible phone call that was like, hey, your life is going to change significantly. Also, best of luck healing that injury that you've been dealing with. It's tough. It's a tough thing. But I'm heartened that we all go out together and that we all still have each other.
And it's interesting that you make those comparisons. I also feel like there's a lot of similarities with music journalism and wrestling journalism. Also in just how publicists expect the coverage. I also published my own website for a long time, Metal Injection, until I got out the safety hatch, and I escaped before it was too late, thankfully. Yeah. So I absolutely understand the struggle, and it's very interesting how the coverage is similar, especially now we see with like this pushback towards who I would call like the established wrestling journalists like Dave Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp about the type of things they decide to report about. And it almost seems like with wrestling fans, they want you to be cheerleaders for their favorite promotion as opposed to actually covering tough stories. And sometimes I feel like the writers fall into that, which is very similar to the music industry, because as journalists, we were also trying to get access into these shows and access to these artists. And if you write poorly about them or poorly about somebody that shares a publicist with this artist, you might lose your access. So it creates this catch-22, I feel.
Yeah, there are politics everywhere. I totally see what you're saying about, the similarities in terms of music journalism, wrestling journalism, not having ever done any real wrestling journalism on the wrestling journalism side. Outside of like freelancing here and there, I did a couple of pieces for the late great Fan Fight, which I did one piece for them, I should say. And I interviewed Brody King, which was a true pleasure. And I interviewed him because I had a screener for Pitchfork of the second season of I Think You Should Leave. And I saw that he was in it. And I was immediately like, I must interview this person about the experience of being on the show. And he was a sweetheart. I think he was like dropping off his kids at school. So I was like talking to him like while he was driving a van. But that's like the extent of my experience with wrestling journalism, is like talking to wrestlers, and mostly talking to wrestlers about like fun, little things like that. Like what kind of music do you like and things like that. When you're a reporter and somebody is accused of serious allegations or whatever, it's like you really have to do some like due diligence and be ready to like hurt a lot of feelings by being honest. And that is very real in the music journalism world too, is that sometimes you're going to report things that the people who you're working with on a day-to-day are like on the publicist side, label side, music side. They're not going to love it for sure. And my last title at Pitchfork was associate news director. I spent 12 years running the news section. So there was a good deal of having to come to publicists and say, hey, this is a really tough story that we're going to approach you with, but we need a comment. And, then the ball is in their court to react how they're going to, and they're not always going to love it. That's a absolutely true thing. And I imagine there is a great amount of that in wrestling when the journalists are doing their due diligence.
Yeah, and that's always like the hardest email to send. Like, hey, I know this is all like you're at your lowest low right now, but I'm trying to do my job here. Do you have a comment? The new in general, like chasing the news cycle, I feel is such a thankless job, and it was my least favorite aspect of running the website because it's a necessary evil. It's like the most just tedious thing you could do.
Well, and what I'll say is it is tedious sometimes. It never stops. There's a lot that comes at you. What I'll say is that it was that like I think that when people imagine working for Pitchfork or a place like it, they imagine writing the features and the album reviews and things like that. But for me, as a high school journalist who was really interested in news, but also really into music, that was the job that I wanted, actually, was to do the news, because that was honestly the most exciting thing to me about Pitchfork, aside from like, oh, hey, like this album got this great score and I want to check it out. And I'm going to go to Borders after school, like get the CD if I have like $20 or whatever it costs to like spend on CDs in the mid 2000s or whatever. That was my favorite part, was that getting to read the news and be like, oh, like this person's got a new album coming out. This person's going on tour. Are they going to tour anywhere close to me? And like, yeah, when I first started doing news for Pitchfork in 2012, that was like the rush for me, was like, oh, I'm telling people about this stuff. Like that was, it is sometimes, it is thankless. It is sometimes really tough in terms of like how much of the news there always is.
Yes.
But I have great affection for the job and also for anybody. My praise to anybody who covers the churn of, again, music, wrestling, any media.
Yeah,
that
just
like
any daily churn. It's so
yeah, the
difficult.
daily. It's a lot. It can be a whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I feel like it's evolved. Like you were just saying that, I was thinking about when I first started, Metal Injection first started in 2004 is when and I feel just news in general was completely different than what news became in the last 5 to 10 years, especially with the rise of social media. And I feel like the algorithm kind of shifted what you could write about because you started getting results on what worked, and intentionally or unintentionally, you would focus on things that you knew were guaranteed to get traffic, up until a point where you start to realize, like, you know what, I don't have to take the bait every time.
Yeah, no, it's nice when you're able to occasionally say, this one's not for me.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
just
yeah.
and let everybody else, do the work on it if they need to.
Well, let's shift from journalism to just the more fun aspects, rock and wrestling.
Yeah, for sure.
What is your earliest pro wrestling memory?
Gosh, I wish that I'd looked this up in advance, the year, the date, or whatever. But when I was very, very little, I was probably 4 years old, and my dad took my brother and I. So my brother would have been like 6. I grew up in Huntington, West Virginia, and the WWF came through for a house show, and I just remember like the feeling of being in the building was just like it's like that electricity of just being like a really little kid. And I remember, I'm gonna get it wrong, I should have looked it up. I'm sure it's on like Cage
It's
Match
fine.
or something, but I'm pretty sure Ted DiBiase was in the main event. I think Ric Flair. It was like that, like kind of, or like 92, around the era when Flair won the Rumble and all that stuff. But it was like that era of, every wrestler is a cartoon character. Every wrestler, like, of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat comes out and he's like dressed as a dragon, and like like everybody, it's like when you're a little kid and you see just like peak Hulkamania, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, like that was the wrestling that I came up on. So I watched it a bit when I was quite young, and then kind of like it petered out. And then by the time I was like late elementary into middle school, I was fully on for WCW Monday Nitro. Like, so
Nice.
like peak, NWO era. Like, I love, that was like my favorite show on television. I think easily was Monday Nitro. I think that like when the Attitude Era came out in the WWF, like my brother and I were just like so young that I think my dad was aware enough of wrestling to be like, this is not allowed in my house. Like, we're not going to watch, Sable and Val Venus and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can watch the show that is ostensibly child friendly, which is.
I see, which is so funny because that was literally Eric Bischoff's like whole spiel about how WWF is ruining it for everyone because they're going to scare away the parents because they're not going
Right.
to want their kids watching it, and then the advertisers are going to run away, which, to be fair, is kind of what happened with the censorship that they got.
Oh, 100%. Well, and it's so funny because like I was trying to figure out recently, like, when did I start, like everybody who was into Nitro, and I say this generally, there were people, I remember talking to somebody whose like favorite era of WCW was like the dying year of WCW, where it was like David Flair screaming Norman Smiley, just like
There were aspects of it that were fun. Like there was a lot that was terrible, but there was like 3 Count and the Young Dragons.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely saw a Nitro filmed in Charleston, West Virginia, and it's like 3 Count were there. Tank Abbott was their DJ.
Yes.
Goldberg had turned heel. Mike Awesome was in the WCW. Like it was a very fun show. It was like probably like the 4th wrestling show I'd gotten to see live or something like that. Because it's like I'd also gotten to see a WCW house show or a WWF house show with like Triple H working main event as a heel, but like ostensibly the face because it's Triple H, and like he's in Charleston, West Virginia, and you're just like, oh my God, this is the best thing to happen. And he was working babyface against Chuck and Billy. So it was like,
oh wow,
it was like a really bizarre show. I remember seeing another WCW show where it was like height Booker T babyface WCW show. But yeah, that was like, I was really, really into Nitro. And I think the day that it turned was the time was, it's like the story that they sold in like the Monday Night Wars documentaries where it was like, oh yeah, you know, Tony Schiavone said, hey, don't change the channel because Mick Foley's going to win the title tonight. And I think that I was enough into just Mick Foley that I was like, okay, I will watch that. And I think that is
this is post Hell in the Cell when he was like the coolest underdog, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, just, you know, and then it's like you pick up from there and it's like, oh, he brings Cactus Jack into like the WWF, and then like all these ECW guys start coming into the WWF, and then it's like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. So I kind of picked up right around then and like would keep up with WCW a little bit, but it was like in the days of just like when like the coolest thing on WCW is the tag team Chronic, and you're like, yeah, this is still cool, right? Like when like new metal was just starting up and everybody was like, yeah. It's like, okay, like maybe there's something good here still. And then like eventually like all like the Vince Russo stuff happens, and then there's like the cage with like the tears and stuff. And it just starts to like, I think after a while it's like, okay, WWE, it's like, we'll watch WWE. Like this is the better thing.
Yeah. That's so fun. Yeah, like I felt the same way too, where, you know, I watched both. And eventually I just started rooting for WWF because it was just such a more consistent show. And just the NWO angle started getting frustrating because there was no conclusion. There was no forward advancement. It was just the same story beats over and over again. And not that I understood that as a kid. I was just like, give me something more.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's like when I look back, it's like the things that I really liked about WCW were so much just like aesthetics first. It was like, I loved Goldberg because Goldberg told you exactly what Goldberg was in like 30 seconds. And you could just be at home and be like, yeah, like he just speared that guy. Like all, you don't need much. And then the other thing I loved, I was trying to remember this. It's like, probably if I could pick like my top 3 guys in like WCW, for me, it was like Goldberg, DDP, of course. And then DDP, I'm just going to say, like, I don't think gets nearly enough flowers for being like, I grew up in Appalachia. Like, so I feel like my friends in like, shout out my boys in Salt Rock, West Virginia, like we loved Diamond Dallas Page so much, and it was just like thinking back on that, did not get nearly like the post WCW career that he deserved, even though it was very short-lived. But my third favorite dude was Conan, because I loved Wolfpack. I was such a Wolfpack kid. I had a Wolfpack shirt from Kmart. I loved, like, Conan was my favorite dude in the Wolfpack, because it's like it's like at that point you've seen all of these other dudes a billion times, and then Conan finally like got the mic and got to do a bit that people got to scream back at him. And for me, I was just at the perfect age where I was like, that guy's the coolest guy I've ever seen.
You were about it.
I was about it. I was rowdy and about it. There's just no hiding that.
Yeah, he was the coolest. I mean, you're right. WCW totally ran on vibes in the cruiserweight division, because I feel like that's what kind of kept you. You're like, you're seeing the great stuff, and then like all the cool people come out and just pose for the camera.
Yeah, well, and like the cruiserweights were the vibiest of all, because it's like you've got like, of course, you had like a bunch of lucha dudes, but then you also had like Billy Kidman, Dean Malenko, you had Eddie, you had like Ray, Psychosis, La Parca doing like the knees with like the chairman, all that stuff. It's like,
yeah,
Hoovy. I loved the cruiserweight division too. Yeah, I feel like Nitro was, that was my jam so hard for like the years where it was like just at its creative peak. Yeah, 100%. Although hard to rewatch on the WWE network because they can't play any of their bad ripoff music that they did.
Yeah. I agreed. It's not the same experience. So did you watch ECW as well?
I did not watch ECW. Same deal with my parents. I don't even know if we got I don't even know if we got like TNN, like the channel that it was on at the time. I think like for whatever reason, it was just either I didn't know how to get it or we didn't get it.
Yeah.
But
it was on
like,
syndicated too, like initially before TNN, obviously. So I don't even know if they broadcast to West Virginia, but
I don't know. But my parents' dish apparently didn't get it, but I knew enough to know, like, you know, like my friends watched it and they'd have tapes and stuff. And I would, like, you know, you'd see like just how crazy it was. And I was just like, I remember it like thinking as like a middle schooler being like, man, this is too much for me. Like, and then sure enough, when all these guys like Dudley Boys, RVD, Sabu, Rhino, it's like I've gone back since and I love it. But like, you know, when they all started going to the WWF, that's when I started like being like, whoa, these guys are the best of these guys. Yeah.
To your point about the network, it really is a bummer how they butcher the old ECW episodes because it's a completely different experience. Thankfully, though, there are archivists out there. And there's something called the Re-CW project or Redub CW, I think it's called. Where they redub it with the original audio from like high-end VHS recordings, but with the WWE Network 1080p feed. It's incredible. You could find it, I believe, on the Internet Archive. You could just stream it, or if you're better with Google, there might be a torrent that you could stumble upon. I'm not going to say any further, but it is a worthy investment because it is incredible to go back and watch with the original. Just how forward thinking Paul Heyman was with his music licensing, quote unquote.
Dude, and like just thinking about like watching like a New Jack match with like none of the music playing, or like Sandman's entrance without Metallica. It's just like it doesn't stack up. So yeah, shout out archivists for wrestling for music. Like, streaming platforms are not your friends because they will give you what they are allowed to give you. They will not give you what was actually originally intended. So I that's why you gotta buy those tapes, you gotta buy those DVDs, you gotta buy CDs, vinyl, whatever you want. But you can't rely on it being on the internet forever.
It's true. It's very, very true. And really, like, with that, so like for me personally, wrestling got me into a lot of music. ECW in particular got me into a lot of these heavier artists. Did you have a similar experience? Like, did you seek out Nirvana just to be like, what does this DDP sound like?
I think I knew Nirvana before DDP.
Okay.
Self High Five, Nirvana ripoff. But I mean, what probably my journeys with music, like I loved wrestling music. I did. I loved I don't know, Hulk Hogan coming out to Jimi Hendrix Voodoo Child, like, is still, it's like the craziest thing in the world to see it now. But I remember as a kid just being like I don't even like Hulk Hogan, but this is awesome. Like being really, really into it. But I have a ton of affection for just even like the early 90s. I was talking about that like early 90s era of WWF. Like a lot of those, like, man, it was that dude's name, Jim Johnson, who did all the old WWF themes. He did like that Jake the Snake Roberts theme song from the early 90s is cold, man. It's so good. I had like a community radio show for a while where you'd have to do like announcements, and I would just play like the Jake Roberts 90s like Jim Johnson music behind me, like being like, all right, here's like events information for the community or whatever. Because it's like, man, just exceptional music. I love that. And I also, you know, obviously, you know, I'm really into a lot of I really like a lot of wrestling. I'm always really fascinated with how wrestling and music intersects. But I think I could just list them forever. But no, the way that I got into
Please go ahead. That's what this show is about.
No, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, the way that I got into rock music, it's funny. It's like they're just kind of like they're a little bit in different categories for me. How I got into rock and how I got into wrestling, because it's like wrestling did rock, and I was like really into how, especially like just like different theme songs, I feel like in like WWF were really cool. But then I also loved like the Run DMC DX song. I loved like the I don't know, I liked when Limp Bizkit, like I was into nu metal enough to really love when Limp Bizkit played the event. Like
Yeah, the
everything like that.
WrestleMania 17 classic legendary My Way hype video. I was so into it.
100%
So into it.
amazing. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Triple H 100% got me into Motorhead. Like that was, I feel like it was
Oh.
definitely like time to play the game, and then hearing Ace of Spades and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Like I just listened to an episode of your show where you were just talking about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but truly iconic soundtrack. But yeah,
Agreed.
but yeah, I remember Lemmy playing Triple H to the ring, and just like this little gremlin, just like, like on the stage, just being like, "We're Motorhead and we're gonna kick your ass." And then they play the song, and it's just like, this is incredible. This is everything I want from a band. But no, but the way that I got into, I really got, I was very lucky to have my mom worked with this dude who, was just like this weirdo, just this really tall punk weirdo who was, he liked the good stuff. So I remember him and my mom talking about the Ramones and just being like, I don't know what this is. He was like, "You've never heard the Ramones, man?" And then like that was just like he handed me like a CD, and then as soon as like I got into that, it was just like all the dominoes just started to fall. Like where I became obsessed with the Ramones, and then I became obsessed with like I read "Please Kill Me" by Legs McNeil and got really obsessed with like all the 70s punk stuff. And then, from there, it's like, it kind of leads me to where I am today. I had a punk column at Pitchfork for a little bit that was off and on just because, frankly, that is not whatever got me health insurance. It was just something I did whenever I could. And I would like lose sleep over it, and I would really like spend a lot of time putting it together. And now I've got a kid, so it's like I have to just sort of do what I'm paid to do. But no, punk rock is that has been a constant kind of ever since, like, I was probably around the same time I was watching Monday Nitro. Like, yeah, I was getting into punk rock.
Yeah, I mean they're two great distractions that in a way teach you about life. I feel you can get a lot of lessons from both.
They teach you about life. They teach you that your anger is okay, and it's okay for your anger to be kind of absurd. It's like, I don't know, like I think, and the Ramones and pro wrestling, and again, I haven't written a thesis about this. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. But they're both. It's just like being in love with two very different cartoons, and just like eating like a lot of candy at the same time. It's just like, it's just straight adrenaline, pure fun, bright colors. Everybody's just like swinging their arms. It's great.
Yeah, and like really, like if you think about it, music and pro wrestling is all about posturing, like all about kind of like taunting and everything, and vibes, like we're saying, vibes.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, no, and it's like, it's just being interested in like the theatricality of punk rock and of wrestling, and like they both just sort of spoke to me in the same way at the same time, while doing very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. And like they both scratch that same itch in my brain of exciting me, especially as a teenager.
Yes.
And then I just couldn't give it up as an adult. It's like, I'm still going to be obsessed with this stuff.
Yeah, no. And it's funny, like punk never went away from me, but wrestling, I feel like I don't know. I feel like this is a common thing where you get really into wrestling in like middle school, and then you have a gap where it's just like, maybe like for me, it was like end of high school throughout college, I didn't really keep up. And so it's like through like the
also
early 2000s.
To be fair, that's already now like, yeah, I think it's also because it was like the worst period for wrestling too. It was very easy not to follow it.
Are you familiar with the Big Dick Johnson segment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember being in college. So like I'd moved to Chicago, and I'm in college. I'm in the dorm with my roommate, Glenn, who also loves wrestling. And we're just like, oh, it's Monday night, let's turn on Raw. And that's the segment that was on. And I remember just both of us like looking at each other like, what is this? Like, what has happened? Like DX is still a thing. Who is this guy? It was like funny, but it was also just like, I don't like, I feel like I was like, I'm not ready to come back yet. And I think I came back probably at the right time, where it was like, I think I came back with the pipe bomb happened, and then it was like, okay, something interesting is happening with wrestling again. Like,
Yeah.
because I feel like it was like the Monday night that the pipe bomb happened. It was like Tuesday morning, and it was all any of my friends were talking about, like like on the internet. And then I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then I started watching, and then never stopped. That was me coming all the way back in.
Yeah, it kind of sucked back then because it was really hard to watch anything but WWE. I guess there was TNA, which was all right, but all the good stuff was on DVDs, and you had to go do tape trading again. And whereas now everything is just a stream away.
Yeah, it's like I know that there's like this vast era of like Ring of Honor and PWG and all this stuff that I've never really known about, and like CZW and like all this stuff that's just unbelievable, that I would love to go back and check out. But yeah, at the time, really, I was just starting to dip my toe back in enough that, after a certain point, even when the shows aren't great, it's like the shows have Daniel Bryan and they've got CM Punk and they've got like, enough really interesting stuff to like kind of keep you in. Yeah, and it's Rumble season. Royal Rumble has always been like my number one like event. So
yeah, it's a very fun show.
Royal Rumble for me is the WrestleMania of the calendar year. Like I feel like even when it always disappointed. I feel like there was like this period of years where I would watch the Royal Rumble and just be like, what are we like? I remember like watching the one where Roman won and The Rock came out to like hold his hand up, and then
that was
like,
brutal.
Yeah, and everybody's booing, and like The Rock's clearly confused because he didn't watch the product. So it was just like, okay, this isn't. It's like I was in like a bad relationship because I was still coming back, like at the promise that it would be good sometimes, and
it could be good. Yeah.
And I loved like Black and Gold era NXT. Like I probably was in from like, I think the first NXT event that I watched was the one with that 4-way that had Neville, Sami Zayn, Tyson Kidd.
So you got in very early.
Yeah, it was pretty early, and this
was like I think the second event. Yeah,
and Tyler Breeze. Yeah. And that to me was like just immediately like Sami Zayn as like sort of the ultimate underdog babyface was really infectious. And then Kevin Owens comes in, and then Shinsuke comes in. And it's just like that. There was that period where they were just making it the super indie, and it was like, it was so good for a little while.
That was just a great time to be a wrestling fan because there was just so many available wrestlers on the indies too, doing all of these shit. Like I went to an Evolve show for like $15. I saw Ricochet, Zack Sabre Jr., like every major indie star, like, and it was just this rules.
I want to see if I can remember this. I went to the WrestleMania in Dallas, and there was a super show the night before. It was Mania. Was it Mania 32 or 30? I can't. No, it was Mania 30 was the one with Daniel Bryan winning.
I think it was 33 or 34. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But I went to that one. My brother lives down in Texas, so we went. But yeah, that super show though, the main event, it was like a 8-man tag, and I remember Gargano was in it. I remember TJP was in it. I'm not gonna remember everybody, but I think Marty Scurll was in it, and Tommy End. I was on one team, so Aleister Black, and then on the other team, there Malachi Black. What am I doing? It was like he was like just about to sign. And then on the other team, it was like Will Ospreay, Kota Ibushi. There were a couple of just wild.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Zack Sabre Jr. was on that same show wrestling Chris Hero, and like Terry Funk was honored at that show. It was like just this amazing show.
Yeah, those WrestleCon Super shows are usually like the all-star game of WrestleMania weekend.
Yeah, and
they
it's
have
just
all the people they're signing. Yeah,
it's like a slam dunk contest, because then you just be like, I showed up to this event and I saw a concurrent double moonsault off of a balcony from Kota Ibushi and Will Ospreay. It's just like, whoa, like just everybody screaming. It's great. But yeah, that was a cool era. It didn't last. It felt like I got less interested when you kind of see how the NXT guys fared as they moved up. It was just sort of like,
Yeah.
you spend all this time like really investing in these like actually like pretty well thought out stories, and then you just see them kind of like, fall away like sand in your fingertips.
Agreed. And also, in a way, I feel AEW kind of took away some of that fun just because they locked in all these guys. So they weren't touring as much. And I say this as a huge AEW fan. It's just,
Sure. No,
it kind of sucked up all that void that was available to have these big shows. Now they're just doing the big shows,
Yeah. And what I will say about that is that it is cool to see who then kind of rises to the top of the indies, like now that like everybody gets locked up. So now it's like that's the new fun, where it's like instead of just being these like crazy all-star games, it's like, oh, like Wheeler Yuta's that guy, and then he gets like locked in, and then Daniel Garcia's that guy, and then he gets locked in, and Lee Moriarty was that guy, he gets locked in, and now it's like Brian Keith's that guy, and he's clearly about to get locked in. So it's like it's cool that like it's like every like 6 months or so there's like a new person who's just like, you're like, when is this person gonna like be on television? Like that.
And it's exciting that they all have jobs, like there's so much work available for these people.
Should we all be so lucky to all have jobs? Just gonna say it out
loud. And so what's your current diet? Like, what do you watch on a weekly basis?
I watch AEW. When I was working, I mostly just watch AEW. A little bit of WWE here and there. I'll catch, if there's like a cool indie show, I'll catch that. I'll catch the TNA pay-per-views. I just watched this last one where they kind of just brought the brand back. And New Japan, I love New Japan. There was a year where I was watching like everything, and then I had a child, and like I don't watch everything anymore. But I was watching like Noah, and I was watching DDT sometimes, TJPW, Stardom. I was watching like all this stuff, and then when you have a kid, like your diet just like it just sort of like comes down to like what can you manage, and what I can manage is like Dynamite, usually Collision, sometimes Rampage, but like normally I'm like catching up. If there's like a great match, I'll catch up like the next day or something like that. And yeah, inevitably I'll watch like the big WWE shows. But yeah, it's really right now it's kind of just like a smattering where it's like I tend to like I'm a big Eddie Kingston fan. So it's like if there's like a big Eddie Kingston match, I'm there. If there's like I've got my champs, like I'm a big
your
Hangman.
Boys.
I'm a big Hangman is forever my champ. Like I'm a big Hangman guy. So it's like that Hangman, my God, that Hangman Swerve Texas Death Match was everything for me. That was like that match to me was like, I mean, I felt like my heart grow when I watched.
Did you
match.
feel like the first time you saw ECW, where you're like, "Oh, I don't think I should be watching this"?
A little bit, like I'm like watching it. And my son's asleep, like over here, and I'm just like, man, this is like one day he's going to know that I love this match, and he's gonna have a reaction to that. But we'll see what it is.
Hopefully he doesn't rebel. It's like, Dad, I don't want to watch your wrestling crap. I want to do my own thing.
We'll see. If he's not into it, he's not into it, and I'll accept. I want him to walk his own path, because the wrestling path is for the truly deranged among us.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe it's for the best.
Yeah, it's like we'll see. I've definitely watched it around him, and he's been like, he's like, oh, this is interesting. It's not like listening to music and dancing in their living room interesting, but it's interesting. Like he's like. He'll like kind of half engage with it and then do something. So,
as we wind down, are there any artists that you're currently listening to that you think everybody should be having in heavy rotation?
Sure. Let's see. Think of some. Well, shout out Tyvek from Detroit. Weird Punks forever. I lived in the Ann Arbor area, and I've loved Tyvek for like all the records, but Tyvek, Tyvek, great band. I just reviewed for Pitchfork. The last best new music that I did at Pitchfork was for the Regana album. A duo from the Pacific Northwest, kind of like sort of like dreamy death metal stuff.
Nice.
really good. Like it's they're like a queer duo who are like, screaming about like just the deaths of marginalized people. It's like a very heavy record in many ways, like not just in the music, but it's like also thematically very heavy. But I mean, it's just a powerful, powerful, awesome album. And then other than that, I mean, really, I'm listening to, like, when I found out that I lost my job, I still had to work a couple of days, and I listened to Power Trip a lot, like really loud. Just the classics. But like I would say, yeah, if you somehow you've never listened to the Power Trip album, Manifest Decimation, that's it. That's for me, that's the one. I'm sure there's a ton more that I could talk
I'm
about.
curious. So like where do you go to discover, like, how do you discover new stuff other than word of mouth? Do you have a system?
I have a million great friends who are music writers who sometimes will be like, yo, you should definitely listen to this. And that's amazing. But other than that, I've just been following so many punk labels and heavy music labels and things like that for so long that, like, somebody will drop something on Bandcamp, I'll get a notification. I'll check it out. I'll be like, yo, this is amazing. It's like there's this Spanish label that's putting out a new tape by this group called Anemic Interior. And it's just like crazy Spanish hardcore.
All right.
And it's I mean, it's awesome. It's really, really good. And that's coming out. If it's not already out, it's coming out like in a week, or Friday or whatever. But Anemic Interior 3 is the name of that record that's coming soon. But yeah, I mean, like, honestly, the way that I find a lot of heavy music is just that I just tend to follow a ton of labels, which inevitably means you miss stuff. But thankfully, there are great writers about. Shout out Carrie Cardoza, who, I don't know personally, but Carrie does some great writing. Maria Sherman for a long time had a column in Spin about punk records. Yeah, like I shout out writers who are representing underground artists. Like, that is, I mean, that's God's work. We got to lift up the little guy as much as we can, because that's, I work for Pitchfork. Like, Drake don't need your help. Drake and Dua Lipa don't need your help.
Well, it's Pitchfork that needs their help.
That's right.
To get people to come to the site.
That's right. Like, look, we love, like, and honestly, it's like, look, popular music is there for a reason. It's popular for a reason. It's great for a reason, or whatever, or it's bad for a reason. But I mean, honestly, like, the thing that I loved to do and get a paycheck for was to listen to weird freaks who were making weird records. Like, I don't know, like 2013 or 14, I think, Hank Wood and the Hammerheads put out that album Stay Home. And I just remember feeling like, this is all I want to write about. Like, I don't care about any of this other stuff. It's like the year that, like, I don't know, it's like all this great indie music came out and all this great stuff came out, but it's like, sometimes you just want to write about the truly, truly gnarly stuff and like the truly weird stuff. So that's what I still
agree with you more.
Yeah, that's what I still live for as a writer, as a listener. So, and yeah, if you guys want any more like weird recommendations, you can just hit me up on social media.
Yeah, we have your social on the screen. Is there any other plugs that you'd like to get in?
Yeah, man.
Throw you out of the pit.
At Evan Minsker, eminsker@gmail.com if you want to hit me up for any reason. I'm around. Just keep an eye out. I'll be working on stuff, putting stuff out into the world soon enough. But yeah, and go and read some of the stuff that I did on Pitchfork with wrestlers. I interviewed, let's see, here are the wrestlers that I've interviewed for Pitchfork. Zack Sabre Jr., did a listening diary with him. That was a truly incredible experience. The first one I did. As much as he plays a dickhead on, in promos, he's the sweetest of sweethearts. Willow Nightingale I spoke to most recently, another incredible one. Willow talks in that interview about loving the band Soul Glow and like having their rises happen concurrently. So again, just like another great wrestling heavy music one too. But Willow is awesome. I spoke with Hook. I spoke with Daniel Garcia, and I spoke with Lee Moriarty. So if you just search any of those names on Pitchfork. Hook, probably also search Action Bronson, because if you just search Hook, it'll probably just come up with like the rapper Hook, who is also great. But yeah, look that stuff up on Pitchfork. I'm still really proud of that stuff. I'm really grateful to all these people for talking to me about music. It was honestly like one of my favorite things about the job. And yeah, otherwise, follow me on the socials.
Awesome, man. Well, Evan, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a really, really fun discussion. And maybe, if this music journalism doesn't work out, maybe just poke your head into wrestling journalism.
Hey, absolutely. I mean, honestly, like, I just got to figure out a way to monetize my love of Monday Nitro from that era. Just like write exclusively about my favorite Juventud matches.
Yeah, let me know about that.
That's a moneymaker. Surefire.
All right.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.